Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Alara Sage. How are you today, Alara?
I'm so happy to be here, Desiree. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, excellent. I am honored to have you on the show. I am so looking forward to this conversation, and I cannot wait for the listeners to hear all of the amazing goodness that you have to share. So, Alara, you are the visionary behind Wealth Flow Framework. And you're going to tell us about this, but also really you're a wealth embodiment activator and mentor. And I cannot wait to hear more about this. So would you tell us, Alara, how did this path come to be for you? Like what led you in this direction?
Yeah. So in 2020, I was a spiritual mentor and I had a six-figure business and I had plenty of money. And then in 2021, I actually was told by my higher self that my money was going to be stolen. This was a karmic debt that apparently wanted to be resolved. And even though I knew to some degree that it was going to be stolen, I didn't know when. And it still happened kind of in this, weird way. I didn't feel like I was fully aware of it. And it wasn't necessarily any easier just because I knew that it was going to happen. So in 2021, all of my money was stolen. And I had, of course, a very first initial wave of fear. I'm very connected to my emotions. I'm very connected to my body. So I knew how to work with that fear, how to release it, how to let it go. And from that point, I just really said to myself, I've got this because I've always had the ability to create what I desire. Even so much that when I was a kid, people would say to me, my family would say to me, like, how do you do what you do? You just always manifest, what you want. And of course, when I was a kid, I didn't know how I did it. I was like, I don't know. But over the years, I learned how I did it. And I was able to teach it as well. And so I went about all of my methods of recreating my wealth. And what happened was the opposite. Instead of recreating my wealth, my six-figure business collapsed. And by collapse, I mean clients stopped coming, launches stopped producing, and I went into the red for the first time ever. And I went into debt for the first time ever in my whole life. And it really caused me to pause and be like, okay, I believe firmly that we create our reality, either from our conscious mind or our subconscious mind. So what is going on here? Why am I creating this? What am I here to learn and gain from this? Because I also believe that life is happening for us. And these are powerful lessons, all of them. And I was shown where there are three primary distortions within humanity, primary wounds. These primary wounds are the wounding of personal power. We don't know how to be in our power. We haven't really been in our power. We've been in a society where we have been giving away our power to leaders and feeling disempowered in ourselves, specifically women. If you look only a couple of generations ago, women couldn't vote, right? Women couldn't have bank accounts. Women were under, quote unquote, their husbands. So when we speak of personal power, it definitely speaks very strongly to women. Money, we have a large wounding around money. We have belief structures that it's evil, it's bad. If you have a lot of money, you're greedy. And again, specifically for women, because it wasn't that long ago that we couldn't have bank accounts, that all of our money was controlled by the men in our lives. And the last one being our sexual energy and not holding shame around that, like feeling that it's okay to be in your sexual energy and have that relationship, that intimacy, first and foremost with yourself. So I was shown these primary wounds and I had to really face the belief structures that I held very deep in my subconscious mind that were passed down to me from my ancestors through genetics, which is a proven thing now that we pass these belief structures and even the traumas, the experiences through the genetics. So I had to face all of this and reprogram my subconscious mind to be able to recreate my wealth. And then I did recreate my wealth, and I felt very passionate about helping others to also create their wealth, but from a different place, right? Because I had money before. But the truth is I wasn't empowered in my relationship to money. Even though I had lots of money, I didn't really enjoy managing my money. I didn't really want to look at it. I didn't really have a healthy relationship with it. And my six-figure business and the money that I had, it was on this foundation that was not empowered and anchored and embodied. It was on this very shaky foundation that as long as I had money, I was safe. But if it went away, I fundamentally wasn't safe. And I felt this very strong urge to help others, specifically women, but I work with all, to learn how to move through these subconscious energies in themselves and reestablish their relationship to their power, to money, and also to their sexual energy so that they can be what I call embodied in that wealth frequency. And what that means is that we're not subjective to external circumstances. We are not saying that the economy is what is dictating my wealth. How many launches I do in my business this year dictates my wealth. Instead, we are in that energy, we're in the frequency, we're in the mindset of wealth. And from that, we create wealth. And that can never be taken from you.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I could see how for many people that we have this thought around we have money, it means we're safe. We don't have money, it means we're not safe. And so losing the money could feel like you're very unsafe, right? And so it's so interesting that you expressed that it was a shaky foundation, that this business was built on, the money that you had earned or were earning was on a shaky ground. And so what was it that changed for you that made you realize, okay, now I need to be coming at it from this way so that it's now not on shaky ground and it doesn't matter what happens externally?
It was when I went to go recreate it and it wasn't working, because that to me was, okay, there's something deeper here for me to learn, for me to see. And so I'm always in that contemplative self-awareness state. So when I ask those questions, what am I really trying to learn here? That was what I was shown, is that I needed to address those fundamental energies of fear of personal power, not feeling really safe in money, not feeling safe without money. My beliefs around managing money, there was a lot of beliefs. Let's put it this way. This wasn't new to me. Subconscious belief work was what I did already. But the truth is that there's many people who are wealthy that are built on that same structure. They fundamentally don't feel safe. Money isn't the solution to feeling safe, right? We often think it is. We often want, well, as soon as I have the money, then fill in the blank. But that's not the truth. And, I've spoken to many people who are very wealthy and actually don't feel safe. And they have massive anxiety because they fear all the money will be taken, right? They don't actually have that sense of safety. So when it wasn't working to recreate my wealth and I started to ask those questions and dive deeper, that's where I really faced those inner fears within myself.
Yeah. And what was interesting too that you said is you were launching courses, you were trying to work with clients. It sounded a bit like the things that you did before just weren't working this time. And so I could see how in our culture, in this society, everything is like push, push, push. I just got to do more. And that's the solution. And it obviously wasn't. And so again, coming back to the beliefs about these things. So would you share with us what maybe the listeners and myself can be working on to change those beliefs, those thought patterns that will begin to move us in the direction of creating this without that push, 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 go, 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 launch, launch, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. There's a lot, but I think the easiest one for people to understand and really grasp is our relationship to money. And so really taking a moment to contemplate that. And whenever you do work of self-awareness, you want to first and foremost address it, come at it from a place of self-love and self-acceptance. Because none of this is bad. None of this is shameful. None of this is wrong. You're not a bad person if you haven't been managing your money, if you're scared to manage your money, if you don't really know how to manage your money. That doesn't make you a bad person. And so oftentimes, I want to point this out that a lot of people are reluctant to take that deep look at themselves because they think that that somehow means that they are lesser or bad or shameful. But all of us have limiting beliefs. It's really the point of the process because we are not in a space right now in consciousness where we are just creating everything we desire because we're still here to learn these deep relationships with our subconscious mind and these limiting beliefs. So I just want the audience to hear that, to come at this from a place of, oh my gosh, this is so interesting, right? That I have this belief structure and look how it's being created in my life. And now I get to have the power to shift this, right? So just coming at it from that is already very open-minded, very open energetically and open in your body. And that will create the change and the significance in your life. And then it's about addressing the relationship. When you think about money, what do you feel? When you look at your bank account, what do you feel? When bills come in, particularly higher bills, particularly bills that maybe you hadn't thought about, right? How do you feel? How do you feel about your money going to the IRS? How do you feel when your money gets really low? How do you feel when you have lots of money? These are all questions that we can ask ourselves that will point to our relationship to money. And you can even sit down and really think about, how do you show up in your relationship to money? During this process with myself, my higher self said, you need to address your relationship to money. And I said, okay. And so I was guided to ask money, how do I show up in the relationship? And let me tell you, it was like, oh, wow. Okay. Because money was like, you don't really show up in the relationship. You ask for when you want me, then you use me as you desire. And that's it. It's completely one-sided. There's no, even though I had some level of gratitude, there wasn't really a lot of appreciation. It wasn't a two-sided relationship. It was completely one-sided. So if you're honest with yourself about how are you showing up, and you can think of it like, it's very powerful to think of it like an actual relationship. Sometimes I have my clients sit down and write out, what are the attributes of your most perfect romantic relationship? What are those primary attributes? And then what of those attributes are missing in your relationship to money? Because the truth is that they can all exist. And you'll see where there's a lack of communication. There may be codependency or anxious attachment or avoidant attachment, right? Where you don't want to look at it. You pretend like it doesn't exist. Or anxious, it's like when it's not there, you feel anxious. When it's there, you feel safer. Those are all levels of attachment, right, in relationship. And we have it with money as well. So first and foremost, just sitting down and really having those conversations with yourself, asking yourself these questions, starting with the awareness. And then you move into, how can I shift my behavior? How can I shift my habits? How can I shift my patterns, right? And one of the ways, very easy, that you can shift it is being really connected to your money, looking at it regularly, being, like I said, aware of how you feel when money comes in, really sitting in that gratitude, as well as when money goes out, when you're spending money. Can you feel grateful for, of course, the things that you enjoy and the things that feel good, but can you feel grateful for the bills? Can you feel grateful for the payments to the IRS? Can you step into that energy of gratitude for both the ins and the outs? That practice alone is massive in and of itself. And one more practice that I like to really do is I like to really think of money as the breath. So as you inhale, money is coming in. As you exhale, money is going out. And the beautiful thing about the breath is we don't have to think about it. It just happens. When the exhale is done, the inhale comes in. And so if you can really connect to every time you're receiving, really feel with your breath, breathe in, feel it in your body. Exhale, you let it go, and recognize that there's a circulation there, that there's an automation there. You can start to connect to that natural automation that actually wants to happen with money as well.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. There's so many points in there that you said. I absolutely could recognize myself in not wanting to look at what is happening in my bank account. I know there's money coming in and going out, but not wanting to look at it and that avoidant, right? And so you absolutely have to look at it. And then it's like, okay, now where am I and what's happening? So, and I could see how if people are struggling, when a bill comes in, you just shove it in a drawer. Don't look at it. Don't deal with it right now. So I could see how a lot of that could be happening. And really, that disconnection can really shut it all down. And so, as you're talking about this breathing in and breathing out, it just makes me think of how it's a flow, right? Yes, money's flowing in and money's flowing out. And if we can stop, like you just said, and recognize and be thankful for when it comes in and be thankful that it's there so that when we have these bills to pay, it's there to go out as well. What a fantastic thing. So I think changing the way that we're thinking about these things can make a big, big difference in how we're feeling, right? I just love this idea of creating a list of your ideal partner or partnership and how money can be that for you. So cool. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about, because I think we're tipping into or stepping into this idea that we're creating our own reality with our thoughts. And so we can create this scarcity or being afraid of situations because of these thoughts. So how can we begin to create these thoughts that are now not scarcity? We're talking about just that overflowing of abundance. What do you think?
We always have two opportunities. We have the opportunities of the actions that we take, and then we have the opportunities of the perceptions that we make. So actions are how we actualize energy into our physical reality. So the first step is, are your actions, that's your habits, your patterns, your behaviors, are they coming from a place of you are believing in your abundance? And I love so much how you mentioned the avoidance and putting the bills in the drawer, because we've all done that. And that was the energy that I was in before the money was stolen. I just pretended not to look at everything. And so what we're doing, we sometimes think, oh, we're just putting it off to the side. We'll do it. We're going to do it. It'll just be later. That waiting, that putting it off to the side is an action. Non-action is still action. It's still a choice of action. And those actions are saying, not really feeling so abundant right now, feeling in scarcity, feeling in lack. So are your actions aligned to your abundance and really the person that you want to become, right? And this is really connecting to the version of you, because there is already a version of you that is wealthy, that is abundant. And it doesn't mean like you have lots of money. That's all up to you. Each person is different to what wealth means to them. But there is a version of you that is in your abundant self. And so we can ask ourselves, who is she? Right? How does she carry herself? What does she do day to day? When she gets a bill, how does she act? Right? Because I guarantee you, the abundant version of yourself is going to be like, a bill. Okay. This is so delicious. I'm so grateful for what this is providing me. I'm going to pay this. It's a completely different energy and different mindsets. We want to be making sure that those actions are from that version of you. And the more that you connect to her, the more you collapse the time and you simply are her. And then the second part is perception. And this is where a lot of people actually miss the boat completely. We talk a lot about action in our reality, but we don't talk a lot about perception. So the other side of it is your physical reality is always behind the creative process that you're in. The now, so to speak, is partially in the past. You've already created this moment. So what we have to do is we have to understand that there's always a time gap between when we are learning these new habits, these new patterns, we're taking these action steps from the version of us that we want to become, and the actual experience of it in the physical reality. That time gap depends on ultimately the difference in frequency, the difference in mindset between your current version and your desired version. And we can collapse it, or it can take a lot of time. It really depends on how good you are at these two aspects. So we have to perceive our reality. You're always perceiving your reality. You can never stop the observation. And this is quantum mechanics. The observer actually changes how the electrons behave. This is a test that they did in quantum mechanics. So by observing, by perceiving our reality, we are altering it. And so how are you perceiving your reality? Right? When the bills show up, are you saying again from that state, I am innately abundant, or whatever kind of affirmation and connection you are connecting to that version of you? Or are you dropping back down into scarcity and lack? When your bank account isn't showing, loads of money, are you perceiving that again from the version of you that you want to become, or the past version of you? And so the perception and how we are receiving the information, how we are perceiving it, is very much a part of the process.
Yeah, that's so fascinating to me. Really, I can get lost in the thought of me as the observer observing something, changing the observation of the thing. And so the thing is changing by my observation. It's just so fascinating to me. And I've talked before on other episodes about checking out the quantum mechanics, and specifically like Dr. Joe Dispenza's work and that kind of thing, because I just think it's so incredibly fascinating and can absolutely get lost in that. But I can see how everything that we are seeing in our world is really what we are creating. And so I just think it's so cool. Can you tell us then, why don't we manifest the things we really want? Like, is it because of these perceptions? Is it because of the thoughts that we're having? Like, what is it?
First and foremost, it comes down to clarity. So just the other day, in my Facebook group, I said, hey, let's have some fun. Ask me a question about your wealth and I will give you information. I'll give you a reading. And it was so interesting to me how few people understood what they were really desiring. What do you really want? And when you ask people, what do you truly desire, the amount of people that go blank-faced is phenomenal. Again, in previous generations, again, specifically for women, but also for men, there wasn't this conversation about what do we really desire. It was like, you need to get a job. You need to put food on the table. Like, you got to work. Like, there's no room for desire. But we're not in that state anymore. And we get to ask these questions. But the universe can't provide what you desire if you don't know what it is. And I always bring in the idea of the canvas, and we're the painter. And you are either just splattering paint all over the canvas and with some kind of preliminary intention, but not a real clear vision of what you want to create. And you're going to get whatever that ends up looking like. It may kind of hit the mark. It probably won't. Or you can ask yourself these questions. What do I really desire? And become crystal clear on what that is. Now, money is a wonderful thing with this because money is quantifiable. Money is measurable. I love playing with money with my clients because even though it's never really about the money, it's never about the money. It's about who we become on the journey to the embodiment of that level of wealth. So when I work with my clients, I ask, okay, drop down into your heart and ask your higher self, what is the next level of wealth that is aligned for you? First, I'll say it always blows their mind. It's always more than their human mind will say. It lights them up and simultaneously scares them, which is exactly where you want to be. That's your edge. And the truth of when you do that is, again, it's not about the money. It's about the journey of becoming that version of you. And that amount of money, whatever that is, it encompasses that entire journey, which is really beautiful. And it is quantifiable, right? You can look at your bank account and say, like, let's be honest with myself. I'm trying to create 50K months. I'm at 20K months. That's really obvious that I'm not at my goal yet. Whereas if we're just saying, I want to be more wealthy, I want to have more happiness, I want to have more fulfillment, those are all extremely valuable desires. How do you quantify it? And so I love to use money because, again, it's not about the money. That money, if you do it right, if you're really listening to your heart, it will bring you the fulfillment. It'll bring you the joy because it's about who you're becoming. But the money gives you that opportunity to really be honest with, yeah, not there yet. Let's keep working on this.
I love that visual that you just described about a painter and the canvas, and you're just like splashing paint on there randomly because you don't really have an idea of what your goal is. And so I think what a great way to think about it. And until you sit down, write it out, whatever works for you, until you really decide what it is that you want to work for to get to that picture that you're painting, you're never going to get there. So I think that's a great way to think about it. And I love the idea also of it's who you're becoming in the process. And Jim Rohn I just love him. And one of his quotes is, the goal is great. It's not the goal necessarily, it's who you're becoming as you're working toward the goal. And this is the same concept. So I absolutely love that because I think it's so true. It's who we're becoming in the process that's really the growth, and just the amazing person that you're becoming is happening through that process. So I love that.
Yeah. And I would just love to say with that, it was really hard for me in the realms of being a spiritual mentor because first up, I thought it's not okay to focus on the money. So I'm not going to have a money goal. I'm just going to, well, it's up to you, universe. I see now looking back on that, how that wasn't clear for the universe. And then again, establishing that understanding that it's okay to have money goals, right? And especially in this concept of understanding that it's not truly about the money, but you can have the goal. And what happens when you're really listening to your inner knowing, your higher self, your intuition, right? Versus like you're coming up with that number from your mind or because it sounds good or that's what everybody else is doing, right? It's very different. But I just wanted to say that because in the spiritual community, it's been a really big thing for years about like, yeah, we can't align ourselves to money because that's not spiritual. But there's really nothing that exists outside of spirituality. There's nothing that exists outside of creation. And it's our relationship to it and what we do with it that makes it either loving, right, or greedy and not loving.
That's such a great point that you made. I think it kind of goes back to that idea that money is evil. Money is the root of all evil. Anybody who has money is no good. All of those kind of thoughts that whoever told us at some point that's been passed down and passed down, but it's all tied up in our heads, right? But it's so good to hear you say that because it's a reminder for all of us that it is just a part of everything else. Money is just a part of everything else. It's not good or bad. And so having those goals doesn't mean you're good or bad.
Right.
Yeah. So fantastic. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So how are wealth, power, and sexual energy all the same? This is something that you talk about, and I think it's so interesting, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about it.
So it's all creative life force energy. To answer it shortly and bluntly, our power is our ability to create consciously, to create our life. And that sits in our pelvis, as does our creative life force energy. All sexual energy is creative life force energy, which I think we can make that connection because the act of sex and the entire, reason, not always the reason behind sex, because it's also just for pleasure and enjoyment, but the fundamental is procreation, right? And creating, right? Creating human life. So it is creative life force energy. All sexual energy is creative life force energy. Not all creative life force energy is sexual. And money is simply a symbol of how creative life force energy is flowing through us. So, wealth, particularly, because I define wealth as our ability of resource, right? Because it's not just money, there's lots of ways we can experience and connect to wealth. And resource, the connection to resource is also that availability to creative life force energy.
Okay. I got it. Okay. That's excellent. I think that, and the idea of wealth and abundance, it doesn't necessarily have to do with money, in that we can be abundant in so many things, right? Abundant in our friendships, abundant in the food that we have to eat. There's so many ways we can be abundant. Doesn't necessarily have to do with money per se, but tying it together in that way, like that you just described, that the creativity, the creation, the sexual energy, all of that coming from within us, because that's where it does generate from. Fantastic. So thank you so much for explaining that in that way. It's wonderful to hear. And it gives a sense of there's nothing bad about it. There's nothing negative about it. This is who we were born to be, is creative in whatever way that we are.
Yes. And, a lot of people don't think they're creative. When you say, oh, are you creative? Most people say, no, I'm not. But we all are. We're all highly creative beings. How you create may not be in the arts, right? You may create a garden, right? You may create spreadsheets, right? Like there's so many different things we can create, but you're creating your life as well. Like your life is your creativity. It's your creative art. And again, like understanding the wounding that has happened through these three, power is, we have been shown power that is actually force. So the governments and those that have, not all leaders, but a lot of the leaders have not been in service to the whole. They've been in a lot of service to self. And that is the energy of force. That's not the energy of power. So our representation of power has been like, yeah, that's gross. Who wants to, I don't want to be powerful if that's how I treat people or if these are the things that I do. So we've rejected power. But it's actually just a misunderstanding of what power truly is, because true power serves the whole. It serves the one. And same with sexual energy. I mean, the wounding there goes very, very deep. We've been shamed. We've said it's wrong. You can only do it in these certain parameters. We have this weird, like, let's plaster it everywhere because it sells, but then feel ashamed about it simultaneously. There's so much wounding around sexual energy, and we just don't have that liberation of it's okay. It's not shameful. I mean, it's 100% just natural, right? There's nothing about it that is wrong, but there's been a lot of teachings throughout the generations that money is bad, that sexual energy is bad, specifically outside of this tiny allowable source. And this is where we have to say, what do we want to believe, right? What do we want to believe? What feels good to us now? And letting go of these generational energies that just simply do not serve us. Again, specifically for women.
Yeah. And you said something earlier about the time that we're in. And in previous generations, it absolutely like get a job because we have to have food on the table and a roof over our heads. And not to say that that doesn't happen in many cases today, but yet we're in a place in this time where we have a lot more opportunities than we did before. And we have the opportunity to explore things in a much different capacity than we did in the past. And so taking our time to recognize the stories that were told to us by our mothers and fathers and grandparents and previous generations, we do need to decide, does that feel right to me anymore? Or am I saying that doesn't feel right? And this is what feels right. And then moving forward with that. So I think that's a fantastic point that you just shared. So thank you. Let's talk about, why are we not naturally embodied in our wealth and abundance? And is that because of these stories that we were told?
Yes, this is a rabbit hole that I can definitely go down. It's absolutely about the stories. And we have shifted consciousness time and time again. We're increasing consciousness. And what that means is that we access more of who we truly are. Instead of just our limited human self, we start to access more and more of our divinity. So, first and foremost, our previous generations, as we've mentioned, and really going further back, there wasn't the same access to our full potential, which even now there's a lot of talk about superhuman powers and these kinds of things, because that's what we're starting to have access to now that we didn't have access. So there was a lot more experience of limitation and experience of lack and scarcity. And if you understand how consciousness evolves, every single part of the experience of consciousness has value. Just like when we think of our own personal lives, when we can see our challenges as being for us, those previous generations, those lower states of consciousness, the lack of connection to source, to divinity, were part of our learning process. Simultaneously, there have been a lot of energies on and in humanity that haven't wanted us to feel empowered and be empowered. We have been in what's called third density consciousness. And third density consciousness is the teaching of victim perpetrator. You're either a victim or you're either a perpetrator. And if you look at this and are open-minded to it, you can see how we have played this out in every possible way, right? The women and the men, the different races, right? The hierarchies, all of it is victim, perpetrator, victim, perpetrator. And there's nobody that is outside of that. And again, it's not right or wrong, good or bad. But we have shifted out of that space now. We're now in what's called fourth density consciousness, which is the remembrance of unity. And what we're learning is, first and foremost, that as we come together again, because I mean, if we are not completely separate, right, and in this very dualistic experience right now, we're actually, even though it doesn't seem like it, we're actually coming back into community and connection and having the ability to access the remembrance that, you know what, when we work together, we're so much more powerful. This is actually a biological process. I was listening to this one microbiologist. She was saying this is how organisms work. They start to, fight against each other first and foremost. And then there's a point of ascension where they realize that it takes a lot more effort to fight all the time to protect and do the things than it does to actually come together as a whole. And that's where we are moving into that new space. So that's the bigger understanding of it. But from these other generations, we have really been taught scarcity. That was what was taught. There is limitation, there is scarcity, there is lack. And so again, that is really rooted in our subconscious mind, as well as that has been the portrayed images in media, right? Like there's a lot of fear mongering. There's a lot of, oh my God, the financial systems, there's lack, there's lack, there's lack. And there's a level of control through that, because if you believe in lack, if you're governed by fear, which is what lack initiates, you are able to be radically controlled and manipulated. So again, none of this is bad and wrong. I know it can sound very like doomsday and all these things, but it's all been part of our process as humanity as a whole. So there are truly no victims. There are truly no perpetrators. We have absolutely experienced those different aspects of humanity, but we're all fundamentally one. And so now we get to shift out of that and really understand that lack is a perception.
Wow. So good. Oh my gosh. Alara, thank you. That was just tremendous. I mean, the point that you made about us coming back together, I really feel like we are beginning to recognize that we absolutely need to be working together as a whole so that we can all grow and ascend, if you will. I feel that 100%. So I just love that. Thank you for sharing that. I knew this would be a fascinating conversation and so cool. And it absolutely has been. I want to talk, though, a little bit about your podcast for a moment. You have your own show that's called Wealth Embodied. And so would you share with the listeners, are the conversations that you're having similar to what we're discussing today? Or what else are you talking? Is it solo? Do you have guests on the show? How often does it air? Tell us about it.
Yes. So the tagline of it is to activate and inspire people in their wealth consciousness, their creative genius, and their visionary impact. I do both solo episodes because I love to teach and I love to bring these very edgy, very out of the box concepts into humanity. And then I also have guest episodes. So the solo episode is every Tuesday and the guest episode is every Thursday. And yeah, we're having conversations both wide and narrow because I believe very strongly in having these bigger visions, understanding from a larger perspective what's really happening. And then I also like to really talk about rubber meeting the road. So I do talk to guests that are much more about like the management of money or the very more specificalities of how we go about this in the physical. So it's very much both of those conversations. That's what lights me up. And I also get to learn as well through those conversations. And yeah, it's really, as you know, it's such a joy to have a podcast and really bring information to people.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you have the best of both worlds, really, because you are able to share ideas and concepts that light you up, but also have guests on that can really share their knowledge and information and teach as well in their specific fields. So it really sounds fantastic. And I'll detail the information in the show notes because I really encourage the listeners to check out other shows because this is all about learning. I think that the more that we can learn, the more we grow, the better that we are in general and with each other. And so I think that's tremendous. I love it. At this point, Alara, is there anything that you would like to share that maybe you haven't said to this point that you really think that the listeners should know, or that person that's listening right now, what would you share with them?
This isn't necessarily an easy journey to look at yourself, to have this self-awareness. It takes courage. And so if you're listening to this and you are excited, you're nervous, you're triggered, you're unsure, I just want to invite you, you can just take a tiny little bite at a time. You don't have to take a big chunk. You don't have to make big action. Some people really like big action. Some people need to move slower. And again, there's no right or wrong with that. And recognizing that you are courageous and you can make these changes for yourself. And honestly, for your family and for the world, because I believe that we are here to change how the shepherding of wealth is coming onto the planet. And so every single person who does their little piece of this puzzle changes how wealth is held. Just think about that. If the people who are sincere, the people who are heart aligned are holding the wealth and distributing the wealth, how does that change our planet? It lights me up so hard. I can barely keep talking.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think you're so right. Everybody's going to come at these things from different perspectives, right? In different ways that feel good for them. I'm kind of like methodical, step by step. I want to just do a little bit at a time and get there. But there's some people who are just like, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's do it all. I'm here for it. And that's great. You've got to just do what works for you. And remembering that you are courageous, that you are capable. And that's fantastic. So thank you for that reminder for all of us. And yes, I absolutely agree. I think we can be the change we want to be and see in the world, right? I mean, I know it's kind of that expression we've all heard, but it's true. And that's why we hear it all the time, because it's true.
Cliches are true. That's why they're said and spoken all the time. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Exactly. So thank you so much for that. It's beautiful. Oh my gosh. Okay. So at this point, I always love to have my guests share if there's books that they have found beneficial or influential that they think that the listener should check out. Is there something you'd like to share?
Yes. So I believe it's called The Millionaire Mind. And it's very similar on these topics of understanding that how you are thinking about money, what you believe about money is really what creates your money. And it's written by a man, and it has a lot of really great information on ways that you can start to shift your mindset and really establish that millionaire mind.
Great recommendation. I'll include the details in the show notes. And thank you for that. That's a good one. And so, Alara, if people have questions for you, if they want to follow along in the work you're doing, how would they be able to do that? Are you on social media or do you have a website you want to share? Please do that now.
Absolutely. I am on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, Alara Sage, on all of those. And my website is alarasage.com. And I'm always open for questions and connection. I love hearing from people. I love connecting to people. And then I also have some really great freebies on my website. There's one called Daily Wealth Activations that really steps you through kind of what we talked about here today of how to connect to that version of you that you want to become, the desired vibratory state, really get that clarity, align to that clarity. And then what I do is I give you my activation that you can come in and listen to every day and really put yourself in that right mindset, that right vibration to start your day off in.
Oh, fantastic. I'll detail all of that in the show notes as well. And what a great thing to offer and allow people the opportunity to really begin to make these changes for themselves, within themselves. And so that's just fantastic. Thank you for that. Oh my gosh. Again, I've just so enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us. Thank you for your time and your knowledge. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much for having me. This was just a delightful conversation.
Wonderful. Well, we'll talk more soon. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.